Did I hear you're shopping for a car? Because I've been at it for ages. Ugh, such a time suck, right?
Not really. I bought it on Carvana. Super convenient.
Oh, then comes all the financing, research, am I right?
Well, you can, but I got pre-qualified for a Carvana auto loan in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, but then all the number crunching and terms, right?
Nope. I saw real numbers as I shopped, found my dream car, and got it in a couple of days.
Wait, like you already have it?
Yep.
Oh.
Go to Carvana.com to finance your car the convenient way.
Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your own online shop stage to the first real life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to the other leading commerce platforms. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo. Shopify.com/promo.
Oh dear. Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. It's I know it's an unprofessional way of starting a show, but it turns out I owe somebody an apology, Kieran. I've been moaning like about the fact that I can't see the countdown to the pod recording, and it turns out I should keep my script minimised until we start because it's underneath my script. After all that time, we've had some of the country's finest academic brains trying to work out why I can't see, including Ed and Ali, and they just it was one of those things, and it's. Oh well, how are you, Kieran? Let's move on to more technically competent things like you. How are you, my old friend?
I'm very good. We're recording this on Friday the 9th, so the football season in England is about to kick off, and the sense of indifference that I had perhaps 2 weeks ago is very quickly evaporating. As we get closer and closer to the start of the Premier League next week as well.
Well, I mean, tomorrow, Kieran, we've got the Olympics and we've got Championship football, Kieran. I mean, that's a real clear the Saturday decks, isn't it? On that one. And for the sake of honesty, Kieran, let's tell we're actually on holiday. By the time people listen to this, let's say 2/3 of us are on holiday, Kieran, because comedy never sleeps. But producer Guy and Kieran. Having a well-earned break, not together, I hasten to add, but Kieran especially is having a well-earned break. I imagine that even at this moment, the Baroness is packing her cases and hiding your laptops.
Yes, I have had the conversation, which moved as far as arms folded from the Baroness.
Oh dear, crikey.
That's certainly dictating terms and what is and is not acceptable on holiday.
Yeah, some of those gestures say 1,000 words, don't they? But knowing you, Kieran, I imagine you've seeded some laptops in every country in Europe just in case. You've planned ahead. So we are away for 2 weeks, dear listeners, but of course we wouldn't go away and leave you without the price of football. So we have 2 questions pods for you. Might be slightly shorter than normal, but we're pre-recording both of those today. We also have 2 blockbuster interviews for you. We have a fantastic interview coming up this Thursday with Maheta Malango, who's the head of the PFA, which is very interesting. A lot of insight, and he gets quite angry a couple of times about various things in football. And then next Thursday we have an interview with Neil Doncaster, head honcho of Scottish football, including some of your questions. And we haven't done that interview yet, but we did bump into him the other night, and he's quite feisty about some of the questions we're going to ask him, so I'm really looking forward to it. So 2 weeks of fun and jollity. Think of it as your summer roadshow, and then we'll be back, normal service, at the end of August. And also, I'd like, Kieran, before we start, to indulge myself, if you don't mind. Normally, we make this sort of public service announcement at the end of the pod, but I'm guessing half of them have disappeared by the end of the pod, Kieran, and are off to do something more sensible than listening to us two witter on about football finance. But on the 16th, 17th and 18th of September, I will be walking from Spurs to Selhurst Park via every football ground in London. It's a total of 62 miles, to raise money for the wonderful Lilly Foundation, who are leading the fight against mitochondrial disease. Now, it would be lovely, two things would be lovely. First of all, if you could donate as small an amount of money as you can afford, or indeed as large an amount of money as you can afford if Producer Guy's listening, then you can do that very simply by just texting the word Kevin in big letters, or as the Lilly Foundation keep asking me to say, block capitals. So you text the word Kevin to 70560. And if you do that, you'll automatically donate £10. If you want to donate a smaller amount or a larger amount, you simply text Kevin with a number after it. So Kevin 1 will donate £1, Kevin 5 will donate a fiver. If Producer Guy is listening, Kevin 1,000 will donate, a lot of money. And that would be very kind of you. And secondly, what would also be lovely, if you support a London team and you're in London on the 16th, 17th and 18th, it would be lovely if you come along to your ground and say hello, or if you want to meet me on the way and walk with me, that would be really nice as well. Happy to have a chat, but you'll be doing most of the talking because I'll be knackered. I'll be giving, just before we do it, I'll let you know the details of where and when I expect to be at each team, but just to let you know how to donate. And I know how generous you people are, so that'd be very kind of you, but don't worry if you can't donate. Just try and send a message of support. And apparently, if you go to the Lilly website, it gets quite complicated. You can go to the Willy website. It's a Russian comedian, I believe, Willy website. You can go to the Lilly website and you can donate on there by pressing my face, apparently. Now, the only reason I say that with some trepidation is that the For Lilly campaign is run by 5 remarkable women, but they're from Croydon, Kieran, and they are what my mum would describe as sorts. They are lovely, but they're not beyond taking the piss out of me. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if they had a meeting and said, he's getting a bit up himself because he's walking 62 miles. Let's tell him that he can tell people to press his face. Let's see. We'll go to the website and see what happens if you press my face. I mean, it's very Alan Partridge, isn't it? Press my face. Yeah. Shall we get on with this, Kieran? Because I've just noticed that the time's passed and all we've spoken about so far is what you might be doing on holiday and what I'm doing in September. So let's start with this truncated questions pod for your holiday listening. And the first question comes from Lee Ashby. And in recent months, our listeners have become fixated with using executive boxes as a way to get around FFP and PSR. But Lee has another angle. As Lee says, it occurred to me recently that many players of teams will have executive boxes or suites set aside for their family and friends at home games. My question is, who pays for these boxes? Knowing that matchday income, especially executive matchday income, is incredibly important to all clubs, I wondered if the boxes populated by players, which could be up to 15 to 20 if each squad member has one, are paid for by the clubs or the players. If it is the club, are they missing out on large pockets of revenue, especially if there are limited boxes available at the home ground? Or could this service be part of player contracts when they sign? I can't imagine there are many clubs, Kieran, that have a box for each player, are there?
No, there aren't. I mean, the standard agreement that exists between a club and a player will allow the player to have X number of complimentary tickets for every home game. So, it could be 2, 4, 10. It depends. It depends upon circumstance, and to a certain extent, it also depends upon the contract that has been signed by the player. And you will quite often see a sort of an area which has clearly been designated for players, friends and family. And I think that's the right and proper thing to do. You'd always want to see some, your loved one, a relative, whoever it's going to be, playing for the team. At the same time, those those friends and family, they deserve perhaps a wee bit of protection at times, because fans can get a bit verbal on occasions. It's more difficult for the away games, but again, the players do normally get some form of allowance with regards to that. If it then becomes a box, that is quite a significant step up. Now, there are examples of individual players who have bought boxes. My understanding is that there might be a little element of mates rates brought into the equation, but what the club would normally say to the player, yeah, this is a very significant form of revenue for the club. We can't afford to give it away to you, so we might give you a modest discount, but don't expect any more than that. Not many players have taken this up historically. I think they tend to think that the cost is very high, and having we've both been fortunate enough to be invited to hospitality boxes, and me being me, one of the first things I try to do is to find out how much is it costing the sponsor, purely for research purposes. Of course,
Kieran. Yeah.
And it's impacted upon price. So as far as Lee's position is concerned, the clubs would not be willing to forego substantial amounts of revenue by letting more than one or two boxes go at a slight discount, I can assure you. And when you talk to people from the commercial department, as one commercial officer said to me when I spoke to him about this, my job, my annual assessment is based on how much revenue I generate from all of the different ranges. I'm not going to give a player 50% discount just because I think he's a good player. Because that's coming out of how I'm going to be assessed. That affects my pay rise. That affects my security as an employee. And one of the things I do think happens at quite a few football clubs is that they are very, very disjointed. So the commercial department is seen as being independent of the playing side of things. And as a result, they don't necessarily cross-pollinate that much.
Obviously, when I'm in hospitality, those rare occasions, me being me, one of the first things I do is check the vintage of the white wine, Kieran. When you're at Sellers Park, you go, oh, it's a 24. I think there are probably issues of player safety or player family safety and security here, Kieran, aren't there? We saw doing Copa America, family of players attacked by other players and other supporters. And I suppose if you're, Bukayo Saka, and you're not having a good game at Arsenal, you might not want your family to be exposed to people having a go at them. So, I mean, there is an argument that they should be in some kind of protected environment, which often would have to be a box, I presume.
Yes. I think it's a sad indictment of modern football. And then, not even modern football. We know what it was like back in the day when things were far worse. The ability. There's a difference between criticism and abuse, and that line has become increasingly blurred. Just because you're a partner or a family member of a professional footballer player doesn't mean that you're responsible for their performance, and also it doesn't mean that they're due to have the degree of abuse that some people who think that buying a ticket gives them the opportunity to F and Jeff unreasonably.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't make sense if someone was to have a go at Ali, because yet again I'd got confused about amortisation on one of the pods. That would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? Yes. Also, I wouldn't fancy their chances, to be perfectly honest. No. Especially not when the Edinburgh Festival's on, because she just gets biceps out of nowhere when Edinburgh's getting on. Mark Collins has a perfect question for this time of year, Kieran. And Mark's question is this: lower league sides often field trialists in pre-season friendlies. Now, I assume the trialist doesn't receive any remuneration for playing, but what obligations does the club have if they are injured during the game? Worst case scenario would be a career-ending injury, and it seems unfair that they would receive no help or not be covered by any insurance the club's actual contracted players might benefit from.
Yeah, I spoke to our secret chief executive, or rather one of our secret chief executives.
I was going to say, you have to narrow that down a bit.
We've got an awful lot of people willing to sort of, a bit like that bloke in the pub that comes up to you and goes, "Oh, I've got a story for you here, mate." They're absolutely brilliant. So with respect to trialists, and I think this chief executive might occasionally listen to the show because his answer begins, "It depends."
Okay.
With the position of trialists, it depends, because it's not simple. If they are connected to the club, so it could be that their contract had expired on the 30th of June, wasn't renewed, and then the club says 3 or 4 weeks later, actually, you're a left back, we've not managed to recruit a left back, we want to see, we've got a new manager in who wants to take a look at you first. Then it should be okay, because the chances are that they would still be on the club's insurance, and that should be able to move forwards. If the trialist is genuinely unattached, been released by a different club, or has come from overseas and is trying to get a trial, what they would probably have to do is that the player would have to sign a disclaimer, so that if anything happens to them, then they wouldn't be guaranteed anything. It would be discretionary. So if they get involved in a fight, for example, and they punch a player and somebody else, the opposing player punches them and puts their lights out, and they're injured and can't play football as a result, you wouldn't want them to be able to claim under such circumstances. So, by all accounts, the insurance companies are a complete pain in the backside with regards to this, and getting trialists onto the club insurance is difficult on the back of that, and that's why quite a few clubs effectively self-insure on a broader issue. I mean, there is sort of a general insurance policy offered by the Premier League and the EFL, but by all accounts, it doesn't offer a huge amount of payout in terms of consequences to players if something happens.
I would have thought rule number one for a trialist, Kieran, is don't punch one of the other players if you're trying to get a job at a club.
Sign of passion, Kevin.
He wants it. I love it. I love it when I see my players fighting each other, says every lying manager in the world.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your site will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at Bluehost.com.
Our next question, Kieran, comes from Carl Hamburger. I make no comment, Kieran, but it's a terribly immature thing to say, but as a comedian, when I come across a name like this, it's just, you start quivering like Finley waiting for the postman. I see it. To the extent that when Ali's here and I'm looking through the questions, she would suddenly go, "Oh, you've come across an unusual name, haven't you?" I say, "Yes, I don't know what to do." And she'll say, "Why don't you just read the name out and carry on like a grown-up?" And, "Oh, right, okay." Carl Hamburg says, "On a recent pod, I heard you say how much money Manchester United have lost under the stewardship of the Glazers. So I dived into the latest account and saw a table of adjusted EBITDAR, which Carl has put in block capitals. And it looks quite threatening, that adjusted EBITDAR over the last 5 years, which shows annual average profit, in inverted commas, exceeding £100 million. But to get this profit, they have to ignore amortisation costs, which is related mainly to player purchases and sales, which is very much part of the bread and butter of football club operations. In my opinion, this table is misleading. So is adjusted EBITDAR the accounting equivalent of diving in the penalty area? Do we need a financial VAR?
It's a valid question, Carl. You're absolutely right to raise an eyebrow in relation to the number. There is no definitive profit measure that we use within football, indeed, or any other business. And one of the things that I try to highlight, certainly when I'm teaching, is that you should always use a range and a variety of profit measures, of which EBITDAR is one. I think it is very disingenuous of a club to only show EBITDAR, and for people not familiar what EBITDAR stands for, adjusted EBITDAR stands for, it's earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization. So you're effectively ignoring your infrastructure costs, because depreciation is the equivalent of amortization. It happens on your stadium. So if we take a look at a club such as Spurs have got £70 million a year in their depreciation figure. It also ignores amortization. So it's effectively ignoring the player purchases, which is a critical part of the club. The reason why EBITDAR is utilised by many analysts is both depreciation and amortization are non-cash elements of your cost base, and therefore the argument goes is that EBITDAR gives you a cash proxy for profit, and that does have some merit. The reason why it's called adjusted EBITDAR is that you adjust for one-off items. So in the case of Manchester United, they would exclude, or rather they would add back, the costs of sacking managers in recent years and the cost of payoffs to executives in recent years as well, which in the case of Manchester United has been in excess of £20 million in some seasons. And as such, the argument goes is that it gives you an underlying profit figure from which you can then potentially value the club. So would I use EBITDAR as part of an assessment of a football club? Absolutely. Would I use it in isolation? Certainly not. It's a bit like if you're, if I was online dating, for example, and there was a photograph of somebody on it, and my conclusion with regards to whether I swipe left or right, I don't know how these things work, but I have heard the word swipe being used by younger generations. Mm-hmm. If you just used one aspect of that person's photograph or one aspect of that person's description of themselves as a reason for going ahead with trying to arrange a date for them, I think that would be very shallow, and you wouldn't necessarily have a successful relationship on the back of that.
I imagine, Kieran, I don't want to accuse you of being unromantic, because I know the opposite is true, but I can just imagine you on a first date with a little spreadsheet that you furtively check under the table to see whether the first date is appropriate to what you've got written down. Is what you just said about EBITDAR there, Kieran, would it be fair to make a rough equivalent that EBITDAR is kind of gross earnings? Is it as simple as that?
I think the way to look at it, it's your gross revenues, less wages, less the cash running costs of the club. So, putting petrol into the mower, the cost of sticking on the floodlights, the cost of your insurance. So yeah, it is a sort of a much grosser figure. And it is a useful metric as well. And the reason why I say that is that if you take a look at the alternative to EBITDAR, which is called EBIT, so therefore you subtract depreciation and you subtract amortization. When I do my analysis of the clubs in the Premier League, 19 out of 20 are loss-making. And this gives you a huge problem, because one of the ways that we value a football club is that you take a profit measure and then you multiply it by a magic number. Now, that magic number for the Premier League, it might be, for the big clubs we tend to use 5, 6 or 7. For a club like ours, Palace or Brighton, where we've got to factor in there's a potential for relegation. I would probably use a factor of around about 1.5 to 2.
Right.
So if I've got a club that's got an EBITDAR which is 150, and I'm going to say, well, I'm going to use a factor of 2, I can value the club at £300 million.
Right,
if I've got
okay.
a negative profit figure, if it's say minus 30, and that will be what you normally say in an EBIT, you can't say a club is minus 30 or times 2, because you get a valuation of a club of minus 60, which makes no sense. So it is a measure. It should not be the measure, and anybody that just uses single metrics to make any economic or financial argument, I think is a bit of a fraud.
Reading between the lines of Carl's question, though, Kieran, it does seem to me, just listening to what you've had to say, that EBITDAR then is presenting a more optimistic figure in the accounts than otherwise.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it is disingenuous. I think you should always present a range of numbers, because in the case of Manchester United, what it effectively allows the club to do is to say that we're going to completely ignore the mistakes that we have made with regards to player recruitment. Now, I'm not going to name individual players, but I think if you look at social media, if you look at mainstream media, you could probably come up with a fairly long list of players that have signed for Manchester United over the course of the last decade who have failed to meet expectations. And I think if you're assessing various aspects of the club, if I was assessing the recruitment department and I was using EBITDAR as a measure, it's effectively completely disregarding the inability to sign players who deliver in terms of value.
Now, our penultimate question, Kieran, I have no qualms about taking the mickey out of the name, because it's quite obviously made up, because it comes from Reg E. Cray. It's nice to know that Uncle Terry is still listening, but it's such a shame that he still has to resort to a pseudonym. And this is a proper Uncle Terry question. This, with many players being accused of inappropriate behaviour in terms of their private lives, do clubs perform checks on a player's background before signing to ensure they are not spending millions on a wrong-un that they may subsequently regret? I know, Kieran, that many managers, Arsene Wenger in particular, always was interested in the character of somebody he was going to sign. He was always, I was told he liked to meet them to make sure they had decent manners, for example. But I'm interested to find out whether clubs do have a specific, almost like a players and directors test, of the owners and directors test of their own, but for players. Yes,
clubs almost universally, if you're going to invest in a multi-million-pound asset, then you should always do some due diligence. You do it for a property. So if you do it for a property that is going to cost us as an individual a 6-figure sum, then not doing it for a football player who could be a 7 or 8-figure sum would be a complete disregard of your responsibilities. So there are reputation management organisations who will do some discreet checking on your behalf. Some clubs even go as far as utilising private detectives to do it on a greater basis. And the use of private detectives in football is quite scary on occasions. I know somebody that was involved in doing PSR checks, and they went to a club that was doing some unusual things, or always alleged to be doing some unusual things. This is a few years back, and they just sensed something was not quite right. And it turns out that the club had employed a private detective to follow this inspector around whilst they were in that town or city. Now, whether that was just doing a character assessment on the inspector is one thing. Whether it was trying to gather information of if there had been inappropriate behaviour by the inspector during the period that they were at the club. And this could have been used to leverage. So that young person you were in the bar with, who you disappeared to your hotel room with, we've got photographs. This unusual expense that we're putting through the accounts. So you'd just like to revisit your reservations about it. Football is big business, and I can assure you that reputational management doesn't just apply to the football industry. If you're employing an executive in other industries, it does. It's a shame. And this is not a party political statement. It's a shame it doesn't necessarily apply to some of our elected members of parliament. But that's where we are. It's big business. It's big numbers, and the last thing you want to do is to recruit a player who it turns out has certain characteristics with regards to possibly their views, but I don't think clubs are that fussed about players' views, but some of the things that they get up to.
If that was Finlay doing a bit of private detective work on you, Kieran, he ruined it by slamming the door and then stomping down the stairs. Dogs are not meant. I keep saying to Smudge, you're not meant to be able to hear cats walk down the stairs, but she's just. If we haven't got a secret private detective by the time we are back from holiday, Kieran, I'm going to be very disappointed. We need to get a secret private detective to find the dirt. Our last question, Kieran, I love this question because I think it is probably impossible to answer. But it comes from Rob Spillane. And Rob says, which player has or had the most expensive name to have printed on the back of a shirt, factoring in the length of the name and the price of the shirt? I appreciate this might be a bit too obscure to find out. We have so many double-barrel player names now, Kieran, as relationships end and people get taken in by other fathers and take people's names. I think in the next generation we're going to be looking at triple-barrel names, and some of the names will be spilling around the front of the shirt. But it's a good question because what a lot of people will do for themselves or their kids is buy the shirt and go straight to the little fella in the corner or the little lady in the corner who's going to print the name on the back for you.
That's right. I think as far as I restricted my investigation to Premier League, and therefore stepped forward, Jan Vennegoor of Hesseling. He played for Hull City and was a Dutch player. And if you go on eBay, you can buy a shirt with his name, and none of those shirts are cheap, I can assure you.
Really?
But yeah, I think some clubs might now have gone for a sort of a flat pricing approach, but it used to be very much the case of 50p or £1 per letter.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think on the one occasion when I decided to get a name on the back of a shirt.
Yeah, which is why it's cheaper to do the hilarious thing that older men do is have Grandad 69. Yeah, that won't cost you half as much money. Has there ever been? I'm not sure if we've discussed this, Kieran, but would a clever agent include as part of a deal a cut of any shirts that have the player's name printed on? Because I mean, when Alan Shearer was at Newcastle, he could have made a fortune if he was getting 50p for every Shearer shirt. He'd make a lot of money, wouldn't he?
Oh yeah, it's embedded. If you're recruiting a star player,
it is.
Because that is intellectual property.
Okay. Right.
So the clubs try to push back because the clubs would normally claim, well, hold on, the fan is going to buy a shirt, and all you're doing is it's a substitution effect. I.e., instead of having Rashford on the back of the shirt, you'll now have Ronaldo or or whatever the name happens to be. But the players' representatives will argue that because some players have reached a point where their level of fame has transcended the sport, and we've seen that with Lionel Messi at Inter Miami. You've only got to look at the level of interest in that club on the back of that. They will claim that you will be selling additional merchandise and additional shirts to to fans of the player rather than the fans of the club, and therefore we do want a slice of the action. But it is very much part of the armoury of increments that players get as far as the level of remuneration that they receive.
And I suppose with somebody the level of Messi or Ronaldo, you're going to get probably non-football fans who might buy the shirt because it looks cool and they have heard of Lionel Messi.
Yeah. The Adidas Inter Miami shirt, the pink shirt from, I think it was from last season, is by far the record-selling shirt in the history of MLS. And Lionel Messi has got part of the benefits of that, as has the other parties involved.
Oh, good. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that'd be very kind of you. It will get access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. And apparently I'm told there's all sorts of other things going on, Kieran, that you can get. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter X and you can find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy our book, which is coming out in paperback next month, you can find details on the same website, priceoffootball.com. We will be back on Thursday with that interview from Maheta and Malango. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you to everybody. We are taking a break. Might be spending some time at home, who knows? But I have been told that the triple F in the relationship with the Baroness, of which the second and third words are football finance, has to take an appropriate break because we are married and I do love her to bits.
Oh, bless you.
So you can support the show in a variety of ways, and one of those ways is to give us a review. And it doesn't matter what you do on the review, it just helps the algorithms. It shows a level of engagement with the show, which otherwise wouldn't be achieved. So you can do anything as you want on the review, of course, and therefore you could say you would rather the show be presented by Jan Venegor of Hesselink and Katarina Johnson-Thompson. And I think that would be a great show, although the introduction could perhaps be quite long.
It would take a while, wouldn't it? If you got, imagine if those two were to get together and have a kid, that should have cost you a fortune, wouldn't it?
Yes.
She's, I'm really hoping today's her day to win the Olympic medals. I've met her a couple of times on various shows. She's very scouse, very funny and very delightful. So it would make my Olympics if she got a gold.
Absolutely.
Today. Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.